Okay, we're live. So hello to everybody listening in tonight. We're really excited tonight for Eric and I to have our buddy Keith Meldrum on with us. I think I've known Keith for 2 or 3 years now. I think Eric, maybe you've been a bit longer. But one of the great things about hanging out with Keith is he gives a great perspective on the patient experience when it comes to pain, which is really important for all of us as therapists to understand. So just to start off, Keith, we can't thank you enough for coming on with us tonight. This is, I think, the 8th or 9th one of these that we've done, and I think you tuned into our last one, and that's where we pitched this idea to get to come on. So we can't thank you enough, and just really appreciate your time to come on and hang out with us tonight.
Well, I appreciate that, and I don't know if you just heard the dog bark in the background.
That's
the joy of doing live broadcasts. So, I really appreciate it, and as we were talking earlier, like I said, we've had a chance to know each other. I think it goes back a couple of years when I met you guys in San Diego, but I think we'd cross paths online, which is that kind of cool. You get to know people before you meet them. But I've just really appreciated the work that you guys are doing. We talk about grassroots change, and I think the work that you guys and others are doing at your level, literally in the trenches. You're there every day working with people, but you're working to make the change in the healthcare system with your colleagues and others is really important, and it's starting to pay off. And for somebody like me, I mean, that just means so much to me. So thank you for the opportunity to come along and join you guys. So
no problem.
Thank you.
I think with that, we appreciate the kind words, but for maybe those that are listening and that haven't met you, or why don't you go on and tell us about why that means so much to you?
I appreciate that, Jamie. Thank you. So I'll just try and keep it a short story because I can talk for hours, and I've been known to do that. So I struggle with the words these days because I find myself going, I don't like these terms. So I don't have better ones. So my experience, my journey, my story, whatever it is, goes back quite a few years. It goes back to August of '86 when I got about drinking with the boys and the girls from McDonald's because I was a 16-year-old and had a part-time job like everybody else. And we went camping one night at a provincial campsite. I lived in Prince George at the time, which is in central BC, and a provincial campsite called Bear Lake, which is about 70 kilometers north of Prince George. So
that's funny. I got family that lives there. I didn't know it was in Bear Lake.
Small world.
I got aunt and uncle that own a logging company in Bear Lake.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that. I'm sure I might even know them.
Okay.
So went camping, and despite being raised by great parents and a mother who said, and she meant it, if you ever drink and drive, I will kill you. You're 16, you turn your brain off. And so I went up there and wound up sort of drinking most of the night. Got about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours worth of sleep. And at 16, not knowing much, because you don't know much at 16, I didn't realize that if you drink that much alcohol and then don't get any sleep, get in a car on a cool August morning, because in Prince George, summer lasts about 4 weeks, and so by early August it's already getting cool in the mornings. So it was August, not that I remember it, August 10th, 1986, about 7 in the morning. I get in my car and it's cool, so I roll up the windows, turn the heater on. I'm driving a 1972 Duster, and I only put on the lap belt. It had the split shoulder belt and the lap belt, and I only put on the lap belt because I didn't want to get a ticket. And what happened was I got out on the highway and fell sound asleep, and I had no idea at 16 you could fall asleep driving a car. I just didn't think it was possible. So I don't remember a lot. I made it from Bear Lake to about, the accident was probably about 35 or 40 kilometers north of Prince George. So I made it 30 odd kilometers. So. But what happened was I fell asleep, and where the highway made what we call a super elevated curve. So the highway went up and banked to the right. And because I was snoozing like there's no tomorrow, I just pitched her right straight over the bank, just 100K right down over the bank. And the car rolled over end. And just wearing the lap belt, I tore myself in half internally. I tore through my abdominal wall and through all my organs, large and small bowel, and into my stomach, and was bleeding out at the bottom of this bank. And would have died right there. I mean, I was pumping all my blood into my stomach, but people saw me leave the highway, which is good because you couldn't see the car at the bottom of the bank. So that introduction was sort of the start of what turned out to be what is now a lifelong experience of living with pain. Obviously, I made it to the hospital, had emergency surgery, first surgery was about 7 hours, was in the ICU for 10 weeks. And then it was just surgery after surgery. And even though they kept fixing me and putting things back together, because I had to have my, so one of my bowels they could repair, the other one they couldn't. I had to have a temporary colostomy because the doctor said it was so badly damaged it couldn't be surgically repaired. But and here's the beauty of the human body. My body would heal itself. So they just bypass that part of the bowel, let it heal, and then put everything back.
Wow.
So I had all these surgeries and I would have complications from it. But underlying all this, I kept having just this ongoing left abdominal pain. And sometimes just terrible pain. It would drive me to my knees and I'd go into the hospital just literally crying agony. And after a while, they were like, we don't know what's wrong. Like, we fixed everything. Like, everything that's broken in you has been put back together. I even have a big, what they call a ventral hernia repair with mesh. My left side, because I have no left abdominal muscles, they put in a big mesh hernia repair to kind of keep everything in there. And like, everything's fixed. And I'm like, well, it still hurts, and it hurts a lot. And there are days when I just can't deal with it. And I was 19 or 20 when my family GP said to me, we fixed everything that's broken. There's nothing wrong with you anymore. It's all in your head. So that's, and, you know, people who are listening and, you know, clients that you guys have worked with, you've probably all got very similar stories where they've been dismissed by the medical system. They're like, I'm the medical expert and I have fixed everything that I can that's in my world. And I have total respect for the healthcare system, like the surgeons who saved my life. But, you know, they're not the be all and the end all. And as we know, pain is much more complex than a simple, just one issue. So to be dismissed like that, all that puts in your head is, well, now I'm crazy. Like, I went out of there thinking, why would I be making this up? Like, how screwed up do I have to be that I would want to pretend that I'm having this agony and go into the hospital and put myself through this just horrible experience? Because when you go into the hospital, and I go into ERs for breakthrough pain 3 and 4 times a year, and you're kind of treated like a pariah. You know, they give you that look, and, you know, they got their charts in front of you and they're overlooking you and they're like, really, what's your pain really like? And you spend hours in the ER before they do anything. It's just a terrible, terrible experience. It's just horrible. But when you have nothing left to do, you don't know where else to go. So this set up years of just very ineffective healthcare, still lots of pain, me searching out doctors, thinking I just needed the right clinician, the right surgeon to do the right surgery to fix me. And a lot of anger on my part because they weren't doing their part to fix me. So, I mean, this is, you know, 86 to 2004, where I really lived most of that until through a series of other interventions, because I would try anything. I mean, we talk about doctor shopping or intervention shopping. I mean, I was out there. Like, if it wasn't going to kill me, I was trying it. Lots of needle interventions, nerve block injections. So I was going through a series of nerve block injections that just were mostly ineffective. And the doctor said, I think we got to try, you know, I can't do anything else for you. Maybe try something called spinal cord stimulation. It sounded terrible to me because they were going to go into my spinal cord. But again, I was going to try anything. But the benefit of that, more than anything, was that was the first time I had an interaction with the healthcare system where the doctor said, we believe you. So to go from we think you're making it all up to we believe you was literally life-changing. And that is what allowed me to be able to look at things differently. Because up to then, I was all about the system had failed me. The doctors weren't trying hard enough. Underlaid in the back of my mind, there's still this little bit of maybe I'm kind of crazy and making it all up. But trying to reconcile, I had a hard time trying to understand how could I actually make that up when it really, really hurt so bad, but it was still stuck in my head. So I kept pushing the systems, trying to figure out, and literally doctor shopping. I would just keep going to doctors, like, what can you do? And often that was simply, well, what would you like us to do for you today? Well, I don't know. If I had the answer to that, I'd fix myself, for God's sake. So it just led to this ongoing frustration and anger, which, looking back now, as I've learned more about the complexity of chronic pain and how our emotions and the psychology of it sort of feed into it, a lot of that anger I had simply just added to my pain. And my default position was to always fight through it. I was like, if I just try harder, if I push more, It was important to me to show the world, and when I say the world, I think I'm talking about showing myself, that I wasn't going to let it hold me back. I can do anything I want, which just simply wasn't true. Made some really bad career decisions based on how I was going to prove to myself that I could do this, and they would fail miserably. So it just kept feeding back into a bit of this negativity loop, which then just caused me to fight and get more and more angry. So to have that moment of validation was truly life-changing. And it allowed me to open my mind to maybe there is more to this than just needing to be cut open again, and want to learn more a little bit about what's going on. And the trigger, it was really weird because I was in the hospital at St. Paul's in Vancouver where they did spinal cord stimulation. And they trial it for 2 weeks. For 1 week, they implant it externally just to make sure it'll work. And then if you get some relief, or if it has some benefit, then they do the full implant. And when I was there, they left a tape on sort of relaxation and breathing, which I literally pushed to the side of the little nightstand beside me because I wasn't going to listen to that bullshit, pardon my language, but I just thought it was all it was made up and, had no effect on me, even though my wife would say to me, when you're under stress, your pain gets worse. And I'd be like, that's not possible. Stress and pain have nothing to do with each other. So I was in the hospital for 2 weeks in Vancouver. And I'm like, well, literally, I got nothing else to do. I might as well give it a shot. And I listened to it, and I can try some of this. And that was the beginning. So, through validation, being told that it was real, and then starting to hey, maybe there's something to this, just lit this fire, for lack of a better term, in wanting to learn more. And that was the beginning of me starting on a new path of ultimately learning how to live better with pain. So I'm not pain-free. I am the quintessential, I have a foot in both waters. I strongly believe in self-management and all of the things that we can do to help ourselves live better with pain, movement, relaxation, but I'm also an active patient. I remain in active care. I will have another surgery when our healthcare system gets back up and running again for advanced spinal cord stimulation therapy. So I haven't gone completely the other way and say, nope, there is no role for the healthcare system. Absolutely there is. I live in both of it. But what I have learned is what I need to do to help myself. And from that, hopefully what I can pass on to others in the healthcare system, what they can do to help people who live with pain. So that was a lot longer than I intended. Sorry, guys.
That was great. That's great. I learned a couple things in there that I didn't know before. So that's great. I'm curious, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but that doctor that finally looked at you and said, we believe you, was that just like a really young doctor that had just started to learn about this stuff? Or was this like somebody who had taken extra training? Or was this just a really empathetic doctor that said, yeah, I believe you?
Interestingly enough, he wasn't a young doctor. His name is David Hunt. He still works at St. Paul's. He was well into his career, but he, for many years, worked as an ER doc. But due to his own pain, and I'm not 100% sure what it was, but it had something to do with his back, he could no longer work in the ER. And he had transitioned into the interdisciplinary pain clinic. And he was the doctor doing the intake interview, for lack of a better term. So I think you guys may have heard this story before, but I'm sitting there at St. Paul's and he's asking all my history and going through all of that, and I'm reciting it. And after a while, you just sort of recite your history literally by rote. It's just, it doesn't really have much meaning anymore. And I was sitting there sort of this way, and he was beside me, and I wasn't really watching him because I was pretty much disengaged. And I realized he stopped asking questions. And I was like, oh shit, what have I done now? Like, here's where they're going to kick me out of the program, or they really are going to say, look, Meldrum, you really are nuts. We can't help you. And I turned and I looked at him, and David had just put down his pen, and I can still see it to this day. He just looked at me with just the kindest, most understanding face. And he just said, it's okay. We believe you. And I was just like completely blown away by that. And for somebody who can't stop talking most of the time, I was literally speechless at that moment. So wow. I think it was I'm sure it was his own pain experience that helped him be able to connect.
Yeah.
And so Keith, thanks for sharing the story. I mean, I think I find your story so powerful, and I've heard it a few times, and every time I hear it, it still gets me kind of choked up. I think it's such a powerful story. I think it's really important to share your journey with people. Now, like once Dr. Hunt said, "I believe you," he validated that your pain was real and you weren't crazy.
Mm-hmm.
What was your kind of like your next steps? Like, what did you do differently after that?
That was a lot to process at the time, because it wasn't it wasn't an epiphany. It wasn't like I saw the light and sort of the next day I got up and like, wow, okay, now I'm gonna just do things differently. I think what it did, Eric, is it planted this little bit of seed of that. Validation was key. I mean, that if we want to use the seed planting story, that tilled the soil to allow it to take, because up until then and maybe I had previous experience with healthcare providers who tried to open that door, but I was so closed off from that, I wasn't listening to it. So his ability to connect just allowed me to kind of have that sit in the back of my head. I'm like, and I'm sure that's what allowed me at some point to then pick up that tape while I was in the hospital and listen to it a little bit. And I like to think I'm a relatively bright guy. I have the ability to read at a grade 3 level, and I can mostly color inside the lines. So,
and you're a firefighter, so
exactly, yeah. But I was never on the business end of the hose, right? So that's different. But and what it did was it sparked this. I got to learn more, so I started to read, and it took me a while to also learn what to read, right? Because there's a lot of stuff out there that you don't want to take to heart. But having a background actually in the applied sciences, I understood what it's about, proper data and research. So it just caught my interest, and I started to read more. And the more that I read about these things, I'm like, that makes sense to me. And making that connection, what it allowed me, Eric, I believe, was to start to open up that there's more to just pain than the physical pain. I started to read and understand about the nervous system, and how the nervous system is, such a critical part of your pain. And it started to validate really a lot of the things that my wife had said, that, the stress and all that anger caused more pain. And I'm like, oh, it's starting to make sense here. And it slowly evolved over time to learn more and to allow it to be open to more. And then it just got to a point where when I started doing some of these things and seeing the results, I'm like, wow, I got a little bit of benefit out of that. I want to do more. I want to learn more. And it just started down this path of, I don't want to say enlightenment, that's a little bit over the top, but just learning and knowledge.
And do you think that, a lot of people, right, when they're been in pain for a long time, they're searching for a fix. They're like, I need, like you said before, you mentioned you were intervention shopping, you were doctor shopping. Yep. You were looking for somebody to provide the magic cure that was going to just take away your pain. Did you find that once you started to accept that maybe you had to learn to live with your pain, like did you find that helped your pain levels? Like, did it help you like hurt less, or did you hurt the same, but were able to function better knowing that your pain was maybe not what you thought it was? If that makes sense.
It does 100%. And I would say it's the latter. And we talk a lot about a couple of different terms, whether it's acceptance or willingness. The willingness term is one that I got from Bronnie Thompson, because it just, for some people, acceptance can have that negative connotation in that I give up and say there's nothing I can do. But acceptance or willingness in the context of, okay, this thing called pain is going to be a part of my life. So I needed to recognize that there wasn't a panacea. And don't get me wrong, if there was, or if they showed up tomorrow and said there is one, I'd probably give a look at it, because I do still live with this pain. But I'm not so focused in on, I got to chase down the right doctor and the right surgery. And so when I was able to understand or accept that, okay, this is going to be part of my life, but there are things that I can do to live with it better. And it didn't make the pain go away, but it did help me learn how to manage it, so that I could do things like have far less breakthrough pain moments, because I would just do like all the wrong things, causing this terrible breakthrough pain. Just drive you to your knees, tears in your eyes, sick to your stomach, because I just kept pushing and pushing and fighting. So to learn, things like how to back off a little bit and to pace yourself and understand what your triggers are allowed me to live better with the pain. The pain is it's there, but it wasn't. I got rid of a lot of the spikes and the valleys and got a little more like just sort of. I don't want to say evened it out, but I did get rid of a lot of those spikes. And I still have them because I still have a tendency to do stupid things. But at least I understand what I'm doing. And even when it happens, I can handle it more. Like since 2004, I have not entered an ER for breakthrough pain, even though there are times when there's pretty bad moments, but I know there's really nothing they can do for me that I can't do for myself.
And I wonder, leading into that, because we, when we're teaching and when we're talking to other therapists, we talk a lot about being facilitators, not fixers. And I wonder, coming from the patient standpoint, when you see a therapist or a doctor or somebody or an advertisement out there, when you see, oh, we'll fix your pain, and that that's not necessarily possible, what your reaction is, and especially if you, before you understood this, if you were going to a clinic like that where they said, oh, we can fix your pain, and then you're not getting the results, how that feels as a patient.
It is, I would suggest that the healthcare system has a significant obligation to the people they treat to be honest, and you can't always fix people's pain. Like I would say probably more often than not, you can't fix it. People do talk about how they've come through chronic pain episodes and they say, we know them, people like Joletta Belton and Amy Eicher, who will say they're pain-free, but they're not truly pain-free. They're just in a much, much better place and they still have their moments. So to say to people, it's I can fix your pain, that's setting people up almost for failure, because I would go to doctors and they're like, a lot of it was needle interventions. Oh, this is going to fix you. So when it doesn't, you are demoralized. This didn't work, which is led by, what did I do wrong? I didn't try hard enough. So whether it's needle interventions and I don't have musculoskeletal pain. I mean, my pain is chronic neuropathic, but whatever the underlying condition is, you are left with, what did I do wrong? So if it's physio and it doesn't work, then you're like, well, I failed my physio. I failed. I didn't try. I wasn't good enough. And it just adds into this spiral of, it's my fault and I didn't do it right. So healthcare providers have a tremendous obligation to be honest with people. And it comes back to exactly like you said, Jamie, is to be facilitators or coaches and work with people and say, here's what we can do together, and set realistic expectations. And it's okay to be honest with people. And it's a tough conversation. I get it. Because in the first conversation, you're not going to sit down and say, well, you're going to have pain for the rest of your life and there's nothing you can do about it. But if you learn how to breathe better, you'll be fine. Like, that's not what this is about. Yeah. But it's probably better than, we're going to do 3 treatments of these needle interventions, or you're going to do 10 rounds of these physio sessions and you'll be fine. Like, you've got to meet people where they are and work with them. And one of the little catchphrases I've come up with is, it's important to treat with and not to people. And we've got a healthcare system where we have, for some reason, we've set up this hierarchical system where the healthcare provider, and I'm sorry, I don't care if it's a doctor, nurse, physiotherapist, RMT, anybody who is a healthcare provider is deemed to be all-knowing and all-knowledgeable. And so as the patient, you give yourself completely over to them. And you take yourself, you could be somebody, I mean, people who have PhDs that have pain and they go in and they see a doctor and suddenly they feel like they don't know anything and they're stupid because they're set up in this hierarchical system. And it doesn't lend itself to success and to teamwork and coaching. And that's why I think, this one kind of irks me a little bit, because I think it's really important for the healthcare system to be honest and to like treat people as equals.
That's great. And just an added question to that, and you kind of answered it, but when you're walking out and you're disappointed because you let down your physio or your massage therapist because you didn't do enough, does that also lend more to a feeling of, I'm even more broken now?
Yeah, it really does. And I think, at least, for me, because what's swirling around in your head, and I think for a lot of people, is you're still stuck in this, it's my fault, it's in my head. Whether it's I'm making it up or I'm making it out to be worse than it is, it can't really be that bad, because people will be told it can't really be that bad. Maybe not in so many words, but in the interactions and and sort of the relationships they have with healthcare providers, it'll come across as, well, it really can't be that bad. But how can I gauge your pain, Jamie? Like, I mean, if you say it hurts, it friggin' hurts. Like, it's not up for me to decide whether how much it hurts or not. Like, again, it's a little bit of a simplistic view. If you had a minor cut on your finger and you were rolling around on the floor, we'd probably want to have a conversation about that. But there's a reason why you're rolling around on the floor.
Yeah.
Like, I might think, well, that's a little
It's still
bit over
there.
the top, but there's a reason why it's happening. So, meet people where they are. And again, this again comes back to the bigger picture, is it's not all biological and physical. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's that underlying component, but there's a lot going on in people's lives that inform their pain. So that little cut finger, even though you're rolling on the floor, might have a lot less to do with the cut than it has to do with everything else that's going on in your life.
Yeah, we've got I don't know if you saw it or not, but a great comment here from our friend Deetria, who says, "You're so well-spoken and have an amazing story. Thank you for sharing your experience. Already, you've really driven home such important points that I hope I remember to bring to each patient encounter. Thank you." Oh,
that is, I appreciate that. And I don't want this to sound hyperbolic, but I mean, I think, myself and there's many others, out there who I think it's our responsibility to take the experiences that we have. You can go one of two ways with this thing. You can go down a pretty dark path, which I'm not sure which way I would have gone without my conversation with Dr. Hunt. And you can have a pretty tough existence, or you can use these opportunities, even though it's not all sunshine and roses, to be able to not only learn yourself, but to help, I guess, really teach others. And for me, sometimes I almost feel a little bit guilty, because whenever I have an opportunity, to talk to people like yourself, or get to go to San Diego, or do something with the International Association with the Study of Pain, I kind of feel like I'm getting more out of it. So I'm like, really, who's benefiting from this? Because it's really helpful for me. But that's that collaboration and working with and treating people as equals. So I really appreciate that comment.
Yeah. And then we've got another one, and I feel a little sheltered's probably not the word, but Julie says it's about adaptation more than resilience. And yet resilience is one of my favorite words, but I have to agree with her. Maybe adaptation should become one of my favorite words as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm a big fan of resilience. I'm still learning a lot about what that really means, and I've been reading some more about it. And resilience to me, I think, is important. And whether you're somebody who lives with persistent pain, or you have, let's face it, most of us in our lives nobody's life is perfect. It's easy to look at somebody's life. I might look at you, Eric, and go, "Oh, everything's great," but I have no idea what you're doing in your life, because on the surface, everything looks great. But we could get off this call and you could be like, "Ugh." But resilience is that, and it's about that ability to develop those traits and those behaviors to be able to help you better deal with these issues. And I get the quote wrong from Hippocrates, but he talks about resilience as sort of within all of us and something that we develop. Easier said than done, because I think we can all agree that being resilient is a lot easier when you come from a position of privilege. I was at a very supportive family. Nobody gave up on me. I'm white, I'm male, and despite all of my challenges, I still am treated differently, which allows me to develop my resilience more so than if I was homeless. You couldn't even meet the social determinants of health, was a female position, person of color. So resilience is it's a really interesting thing, but I'm learning it's not as easy to develop as I maybe thought originally. So
yeah, that's really interesting stuff, especially for three guys who essentially come from privilege, are white guys, and haven't had to face a lot of those things.
It is, yeah. I just I think, we just know the stats. Women in general are believed much less than men about pain. I had some terrible interactions in the healthcare system, like just abysmal. And I get the benefit of the doubt, for God's sakes, really. Which
is, for lack of a better term, crazy when you think about how much tougher women are than us, that they can deliver a child, and yet people dismiss them as far as their pain experience.
Yeah, they're hysterical. They're all of that. So
yeah.
Again, and so when I talk a lot about the healthcare system sort of better understanding the complexities of pain, and I know that's what you guys you talk about. It's not just the biological; it's the psycho and the social. Even that alone is it's very complex, and there's, A plus B does not always equal C in this case, but we've got to have these conversations. We've got to have people like you guys out there talking about this, so we can get people to understand that it is more involved and complex than that. And we're going to stumble our way through it, and sometimes we're going to stub our toes. But if we're moving forward, we're making the change that we need to make. So.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, stories like yours, Keith, like I said before, are just hugely inspirational, because I think it really drives home the point of kind of so many things that are wrong in the kind of musculoskeletal, professions like massage, physio, chiropractic, which there's always looking at this fix mentality, or looking at this, I see this thing wrong, we provide this intervention, and therefore you get better. But then when people don't get better, then it's like, well, the patient must have done something wrong, or maybe I'm not a good enough therapist, and maybe I need to start learning a different technique or a different intervention or modality. And I think the stuff that, just Jamie and I are a small, tiny little bits of a larger group of people that are trying to make change here. But I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to just get people to know that pain is complex. Pain is not simple. And then if you can accept that there's a lot of uncertainty when treating people with pain, then I think it makes our jobs actually a lot easier, because we don't know your experience. All we know is what you tell us. And if there's something bio that like maybe we can help with, then maybe we can. But if there's other things going on, then at least maybe we can just, listen to your story and reflect that back to you, or maybe then you can say, then maybe we can have a conversation about that. And like you said, right, just being validated sometimes and listening and spending the time with somebody seems to be the thing that's most important. And that's the message I think that we're really trying to get across to everybody that'll spend the time to listen to us.
I think that really is key. And again, just hearing you say that, Eric, it just reminds me again of just how complex this is. And I look back again at my own experiences, and I realized there were times when I dumped a lot of shit at the feet of a doctor, because I was going to them to fix me, but I was bringing all of this baggage with me. And looking back on it, I had a ton of baggage, because there was a 16-year-old kid who entered into this rather traumatic experience, was given no psychological support to nearly die. And again, even saying those words sounds a little bit sort of almost unreal. But when I was at the bottom of that slope, I knew I was dying, and it wasn't a great halo and harps and it was the worst unimaginable pain of my life. But I just wanted to die. I had no will to live anymore. And so you got to reconcile all that, and you're carrying all that baggage with you. Nobody who at any point when I got out of the hospital the first time said, you might have a little bit of trouble processing some of this. It was like, well, we put you back together. We'll see you in 3 months when we're doing the surgery. Good luck. Meanwhile, I carry all of that with me to somebody like you and say, well, you got to fix me. And you're like, whoa. But just giving that space to listen. And sometimes people, that's just what they need to do, is just be able to talk. Know that maybe you can't fix that problem for them today, but you can just be there for them. You can listen to them. You can give them space. And as much as I hate that term, I don't know what a better one, but give them that opportunity to just share their story. And like you said, just listen. And that's what I think helps people start to be able to work through some of this, and helps people like myself recognize that this isn't about going to one person to get it fixed, because I also have a role to play in this. But I need to get, people need to get to a point where they realize that they have, have a role to play in this as well. It is terribly complex. And the more I read and continue to learn about my own life, and like I said, I just turned 50 last month. August this year, she'll be like 34 years. 2/3 of my life has been this. I'm still figuring stuff out. I get it wrong sometimes.
You don't look a day over 49, Keith.
Excellent. I appreciate that, man.
we got a couple of comments here. One from our friend Sandra Mowat. She says, "Thank you for your frank and honest evaluation of your journey. It is experiences of learning like this that help to move all our understanding forward." So that's great. And then something Richard, our buddy and Eric's business partner, left a comment. And I'm curious about this as well. He says, "Always appreciate hearing you, Keith. You talked a bit in San Diego about your experience with guilt after the accident, and found that part of your story very interesting. Would you speak a bit about that? I'd be curious about that as well."
Yeah, I gotta take it. I gotta take a deep breath with that one because it's one that I do still
Probably fairly
struggle with a
emotional.
bit. It is, and I'm still learning how to kind of understand that. And I have better days when I deal with it, and other days, some of which just happened recently, I just all kind of falls apart.
And if you're not comfortable
You know,
talking about it, you don't need to either.
no, I'm totally good because, like I
Yeah.
said, in a way, I think these conversations help me kind of get some of this out of my head. Because one of the things I used to not do was talk about it. I stuffed it all in a little tiny box and shoved it down as far as I could go, locked it, stomped on it, buried it, and pretended it never happened. So, but in the front of my mind, I know the guilt that I carry around, and the guilt that I carry around is I did this to myself. That is my underlying story, and I look at people who have terrible stories of their own pain or other health issues where, through no fault of their own, this happened to them. And I'm like, yeah, but I did it. I went out. My parents said, don't do it, but I went drinking. I did all of these things. I know in the front of my mind at 16, it's not really realistic. My wife is very good at reminding me that, like, at 16, the 16-year-old brain is like a 4-year-old still half the time as a guy. You're still
You're
developing.
bulletproof
Right?
at 16.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I know rationally, I know it wasn't really my fault, but I carry with me, but I did it, and like I said, I see these other people, with terrible instances and, through no fault of their own, maybe a car accident where somebody hit them, or they're afflicted with, some sort of illness that causes it. And I'm like, that's terrible. And it must be horrible when, like, you didn't do anything. And I'm like, but I did it. So to carry that, and when I have my really bad days, which are usually caused because I push too hard, because I get really, because there's stuff that I can't do, because I still, because of the physical damage and trauma that I have to there's still physical things that I can't do because it will bring on the pain. And I will still get to points where, like, I'm doing it anyway. Like, I'm so sick and tired of this. I'm going to do it, which is all tied up into, Meldrum, you did this. It was your fault. You just got to man up and get through it. And then I just create these terrible situations for myself where I just put myself into this terrible pain. And then it's just this big mess of emotion of, now I'm just anger, and there's still the guilt, and I'm frustrated. And if I had a cat, and I apologize to all the cat people out there, I would kick the cat, put my fist through a wall. It just gets all knotted up in this ball of, but it's my fault. And it's, to this day, it's still something that I try and work through.
Well, thank you for that, because I can imagine that that's hard to talk about. Another question that we've got from Kimberly. She says, if you had come across a doctor who listened earlier in your journey, do you think he would have had the same impact, or would you have still been searching for the fix at that point? Did you need to come to a certain point yourself before recognizing the comfort of a different experience?
That is such a great question. And I think if I was being honest with myself, which is tough because I like to lie to myself, because then I can tell myself I'm taller and better looking.
Me too.
Yeah, there you go, man. See, we got so much in common. I don't. What's the best way to? I think I needed to go through a certain amount of this journey before I came to a place where whether it was acceptance or willingness, before I was like, okay, I need to try and do, or be open to doing something different. Now, having said that, I think if I would have entered a healthcare system that was prepared for this going in, and maybe right out of the chute, like literally when I first woke up in the ICU, and I couldn't open my eyes because I smashed myself in the face with the steering wheel, and my eyes were closed shut because they were all bruised up. But when I finally could open them, if conversations were going to be about, okay, here's some of the challenges and things that you're going to have, it might have made that transition earlier. But for me, in the absence of that kind of proper holistic care, I think at 20, if I would have had somebody come along and try and have this conversation with me, I would have been, you're nuts. I just got to keep finding the right doctor to fix me. So I, as weird as this sounds, I think I needed to go through some of the challenges. Like, I talk about some of the bad decisions I made. Growing up as a kid, all I was ever going to be was a cop. I was going to join the RCMP. I mean, this is in the 80s, right? So I had my car accident. Like, that's probably not going to happen right now. And in the late 80s, the RCMP, even if I was healthy, weren't really recruiting white guys at that point, understandably so. So But I was 21 years old, had had my fourth or fifth surgery, was in a moment where I was stable, still had pain. I joined the military. I put in my recruit papers and I got accepted. And when I was doing the medical, the doctor says to me, he's reading my chart and he's like, wow, that's, well, you had this accident, you surgery. And he's like, how are you today? And I'm like, today, I'm fine. Because sitting in his office, I'm like, sure, I'm okay. Because I needed to prove to myself that it wasn't going to let anything hold me back. 6 months later, I'm in an airplane going to my recruit school in Cornwallis, Nova Scotia. And needless to say, I was medically discharged from the military when I had surgery because they're like, what the hell are you doing here, kid? You're a mess. I was in a PT class one day and everything just friggin' fell apart. But that was all me sort of pushing and trying to prove to myself that I could do more. So I think I needed to have a few bumps along the way, I guess is what I'm saying.
And I wonder too, because I'm sure the both of you could probably agree with me on this, is at 16 years old, you're full of bravado and piss and vinegar, for lack of a better term. And I know certain things that I went through when I was that age, if they'd have said, oh, you need to talk to a counselor or a psychotherapist or something like that, I would have been like, no, not a chance.
Yeah, and like I said, I still, it's still, I understand and I know how important the psychological and the emotional effects are on one's pain. And I read a shitload of research papers on it, the good ones, not the crazy ones, hopefully the good ones. And that helps me. But I still struggle with being able to actually have like this conversation with somebody who is a psychologist. And I went once and I went out of there so uncomfortable and just so frustrated and knotted up in my chest. I can't, that's a barrier. It's a line I can't seem to get across. I can have this conversation with you guys. Mm-hmm. I'm okay. Put me in front of a psychologist and I just sweat bullets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One question I had, and this is something I've had conversations with lots of other people about before, so I wanted your opinion, Keith. You mentioned Kimberly's question was good about, if you had seen this physician earlier, mm-hmm. Would the difference. One thing I'm always curious about is if it was possible to change kind of the kind of cultural and societal understandings and attitudes about pain. For somebody like yourself that's lived with pain for so long, do you think your suffering would have been easier if everybody kind of had this more holistic view of pain?
Unequivocally, yes. Yeah. I don't think in any way I would say it would. In my case, just looking at my situation, what I don't know if it wouldn't have gone away per se, but it would have made living with it way easier, Eric. Because it was those years of just the anger and the anguish of fighting to pushing up against this wall of being pushed back. And that was a big wall. I mean, you talk about Jane, you're 16 or 18 and you're tough and full of piss and vinegar. Well, I would push and push and push. And this wall would just be like, Meldrum, you got nothing, and just slam me back. So it was this constant tension of me pushing and it pushing back. And I think, Eric, absolutely, if there was just, even if there was some modicum of holistic care or understanding. We talk about these peaks and valleys. I think it would have smoothed some of that out. Probably allowed me to come to this position earlier, going back to the question. I still think I needed for me to probably go through some of what I went through, but looking back, I wouldn't have turned down some of that being a little easier to get through. So, yeah.
No doubt. So we've got another question up from Jocelyn, who I think you met in San Diego as well. She says, thank you so much for sharing your story. Did you ever bump into healthcare providers that had different explanations for your pain? If so, how would you suggest healthcare providers approach explaining pain? Or from your point of view, is that even important to a person living with chronic pain seeking help with managing it?
Ooh, that's the second part of the question is really good. So for the first part, did I ever bump into healthcare providers that had different explanations for your pain? So for the first, from the 86 to 2004, all I was met with was a truly biomedical focused, you have this damage and here's what we can do to help alleviate that. And then that's it. So it was a very, very narrow focus. Nobody talked about anything other than You've got an underlying pathology. You've damaged all of these things. They did surgery once for trapped nerves, which looking back, I don't even know what the hell that is, but they cut me open one day to free up trapped nerves, which I think we can agree probably just caused more problem than it fixed because they opened me up again. So, so no alternative explanation until I started dealing with people who are a little more pain informed. And the second part of the question, is it important for a person living with pain, seeking help, explaining pain? Yes, I think it is vitally important to be able to explain pain. The trick for people like you guys is finding that moment of when to introduce it and how to introduce it. And I don't have a perfect answer for you guys for that one. It's tough because I know for me, if somebody would have tried to come in at some point and say, well, Meldrum, there's this thing called the biopsychosocial framework, and you would have just seen me just go kablam, like just shut down. But I think what clinicians and healthcare providers can do is learn to sort of read their patients and know when to introduce that a little bit. And even if all you do is drop that seed a little bit, and just plant it like it happened for me, and then just go away, and then maybe come back and tend to it a little bit, throw a little water on it when needed, it'll grow. But I believe it's critically important for people to be able to live better with their pain, to understand and have it explained to them a little bit. I did a lot of it searching out on my own, like I said, reading a lot of scientific research papers that I would have to read like 4 times because I didn't understand the big words and there were no pictures, and I was like, holy Christ. So, I really appreciate it to this day when people like yourselves are able to explain it, even if it's just a little bit in a fairly simplistic term. I think people will start to, you might even, I don't know, maybe you see their body language change a little bit. They're kind of, okay, maybe they're not going to jump up and go hallelujah and hug you and get it, but they might just, okay, there's something to that, but it's finding your timing.
I wonder too, and it's funny, we had a discussion about this on our course on the weekend, but I've had this discussion with people several times about, we quite often feel as manual therapists that we just need to get the patient on the table. And we feel like maybe a patient's watching their clock and going, I booked a 60-minute appointment and I want 60 minutes of treatment time. And we're trying to preach a little bit more about, like, just let them talk, take your time. You don't have to be in a rush to get your patient on the table. And granted, some patients may want that, but in order to validate their experience and let them be heard, and we're much more trying to preach, and I'm trying to do it more with my patients, of just letting them talk when they first come in. And I don't worry so much about rushing to get them on the table. And how would you feel that as a patient who's going in for treatment? Are you more of the, I want to get on the table right now, or have that conversation?
I think back in the early days, I was more about, I got to get on the table because I think I was conditioned to that's what it's about. Like, if I'm coming to see you, the reason is because you're going to do something to me. And so it's a bit of that crossing that chasm of, for me, I needed to understand a little more. But I really do, if I look back on it now, and this is actually, I'm really interested to know your guys' experience, if I can kind of put it back on you. Sure. But what it's like if you actually, because I'm sure, people are at different points of their lives, but if you actually just provide them that moment to just sort of be present and talk a little bit, instead of like, okay, how are you from our last time we see you? Does this still hurt? Does that hurt? Okay, I'll be out and I'll come back in 5 minutes. If you just are a little more in tune and realize they just need a little bit of time to talk, and maybe just give them that, because I believe that's invaluable. And to this day, I just go to my RMT because I still find it quite relaxing, and I understand everything that's behind, massage therapy. But we often have a very good conversation starting, and she will just let me talk until I'm done. Yeah. Do you guys find that? Are you finding that you're having some of your clients or your patients are just like, you can kind of almost see like they want to talk, they don't want to jump up on the table? Yeah,
I think it varies patient to patient for sure. And I think when it's somebody that I've been seeing for a couple of years, sometimes it's, just do the same old thing. I'm just back for, I just want you to work on my shoulder again, or want you to work on my neck again, because they were in 2 weeks before. So in those cases, it's not so much of a big conversation, but quite often I have people who come in who've been in a car accident or have been through something, or maybe just having a stressful day at work, and come in and I'll just sit down and just let them go. And I just let them carry the conversation and decide how long this is going to go for the most part, other than hopefully answering a couple of insightful questions as we go. And I found it much more effective and found out a lot more about people and what they're going through by just sitting back and letting them go. But Eric, I'll let you carry on with your experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question, Keith. And I think Jamie covered a lot of it there. I found that, once I kind of started, years ago, I started to try to incorporate a more kind of holistic, like biopsychosocial understanding with patients. I felt that, by giving them that space and saying, like, is there anything you want to share, and not pin, not like pinning them to like specific, like yes or no, black and white questions, but more like just giving them these kind of this open avenue to tell me what they wanted to tell me. I felt that really benefited the kind of clinical, therapeutic relationship. And I found a lot of patients, particularly the ones that we would like to call like the difficult, like the hard ones, like the ones that people have been in pain for a long time and they've had no answers, right? Those ones I found the most success by just being the and I always hear your voice in the back of my head, just validate the experience and listen to their story. And I always hear Keith back here looking down at me. And by giving them that, I have found that the breakthroughs that they have come through on their own, rather than me doing something to them, but just providing that space and kind of reflecting their story back to them. And maybe, like you said before, planting some other seeds of like, well, maybe this might be related, or maybe this might be related. And then they come back, and then they'll come back often with an understanding of like, last time I was in, you mentioned this thing. Can we talk more about that? Because I've opened that door for them to tell their story. And I found that those are the ones where they come because they expect me to do something to them with my hands, which we are doing, manual stuff and movement. And we're giving them some exercise. But intuitively for me, I find the thing that's most beneficial for them is having somebody there that is like their coach or their partner during their journey that is actually there for them.
Yeah.
So I feel that, some people just want to get on the table and they want you to do something to them. I always let people know that they can just keep their story going while they're on the table. Because maybe during that face-to-face interaction, they don't feel comfortable.
Yep.
But if they're, lying down, either on their back or on their side or on their front, and you're not like looking right at them, sometimes people feel really comfortable and open up, and that can be very powerful.
And I think that's actually, sorry, Keith, I didn't mean to.
Go ahead.
I think one of the big advantages that we have as massage therapists is we get a lot of time with people. And, I'm sure that anybody who's listening in, you can say the same thing, that you get a patient on the table and for an hour, they won't stop talking.
Right. Yeah.
So, which is great. I mean, you find out a lot about people, and they're given that time where they can talk if they want to. So I think that's a bit of an advantage to what we do is allowing people that space and time to talk.
And that's just what I was going to say. And I, go back to my earlier comment, I talk about sort of grassroots change. And I really do believe, the people in your profession, the massage therapists and even the physiotherapists are the ones that can really help affect this change and move things forward the way we need it. Just from everything that you've said, you do have more opportunity to spend with people. This is going to be a terrible blanket statement, but that's okay. I think a lot of massage therapists, I think you guys are just wired because you are a little more in tune with people. And I don't mean to say that, doctors are all very standoffish and impersonal, but I think it's just different because your profession is so much more hands-on and you spend that time with people. And I think, it's really interesting, and I get really excited when we have these conversations because this is the change. This is where the change will really grow, and we're seeing it, from the top, system change, and there are people out there who are working on systemic change, but that's big change. That's tough. That's moving the needle 1 degree is a tough push. But down here, where you guys are in the trenches every day with people and just being in tune with them, and just as you said, Eric, just having a little chat with them and giving that space, planting those seeds. That's where I'm excited because that's where I believe we will start to see a lot of this groundswell of change grow. And if you people can help themselves. Just again, a very blanket statement. People can help themselves if they're given support and they have a trusting relationship. We talk about therapeutic alliance. Well, that's what it's about. It's feeling comfortable and safe with somebody like you to have that conversation, or in a really dark place, and it's harder to come back from that. But when you're able to give them that space and to just support them, they can then, like you say, they come back to you and they say, you know, Eric, last time I was here, you were talking about this thing. That's a huge win. Like that's amazing, and never underestimate how important that is. So yeah. That's very interesting.
That's great to hear, Keith. Yeah, and I think we were off air when we were chatting before, but just when Jamie and I first started teaching a few years ago, and we presented a number of these concepts to the group, we received tons of backlash and people pushing back, and we just did one this past weekend, and we did it via Zoom, which was actually worked out pretty well, better than we thought. It was like the whole group was like, yeah, I've heard, like they all knew it, they'd all heard it before, and so it's not only I think if as therapists, like you said, in the trenches, if we're relaying that information to the patients, but also like if other therapists, we're all talking about this and everyone else is starting to hear these this different story or this different framework, like that just multiplies and goes toward like all those patients now that everyone's seeing is hopefully going to get a different story. And so it's encouraging, I think, to see these from multiple different levels starting to create a better understanding and hopefully a better treatment framework for people that hurt.
I think it's coming. And again, you said earlier, pain is, I mean, here's the simplest statement, but it's so powerful. Pain is complex, right? And it's, you can't wrap it up in a 30-second conversation or a half-hour course, but just be open to the fact that it is complex and we don't understand all of it, but we're finding our way through this. And so to do just exactly everything you've said, to give people that space and to hear that the message is getting out there and people are saying to you in their latest course, yeah, I've heard that. That's amazing. Now we just need to make sure that the message continues to be delivered correctly, because the one thing I would hate to see is we don't start to swing this the other way and now it runs off and now it all becomes about, and this is a huge sort of push the other way, but we're just going to talk your pain away, because we don't want to get into that, right? Because it is real. I mean, somebody like me with neuropathic pain, which is a little bit weird and different, there's still an underlying pathology there. We're not saying the pain isn't real. All we're saying is the pain is just a part of your life, but you can kind of, for me, I say I can park it over here. I steal a line from Green Day and I talk about it being the shadow that walks beside me. Well, it's just, it doesn't need to be, I don't need to be cloaked in it. It just needs to be there beside me, but I need help, and I continue to need reminders from people like yourselves to just be able to talk through this sometimes and understand what is this thing that's beside me. And it's okay. It's not the big bad boogeyman that it used to be, because it used to be all encompassing. It was all it was, and I hated it. Well, I can kind of park it off to the side now and learn how to coexist with it fairly well. I have days when it gets in front of me and trips me up and kicks me in the ass, but I can learn how to get up and dust myself off. But I can't do that alone. I need people like you guys to help me get there. So I'm encouraged. I really am.
We're always here for you, man. Anytime you need help.
That's great.
Appreciate it.
Another great comment from Detrius. He says, in my little research study that explored the value of touch in really difficult circumstances, some people really emphasize that we all cope differently. Some people are verbal and some are not. For some, processing happens in an opportunity to relax and experience their body differently. Interoception has been coming up lately, and I've been thinking about this concept. Some people value the opportunity to talk to someone who is fully present, as Gabor Mate would call it, a compassionate, I don't know if that means witness.
Witness, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I think so. I'm a little bit, I got to look back because I know where I was years ago. Here we're talking about being able to talk and share your story. Years ago, you couldn't get me to say boo. Like, I just locked it all away. So it is a little bit sort of ironic to have me sitting here talking about how important it is to talk, because you couldn't get words out. You couldn't drag it out of me. Yeah. And my default position to this day is when I'm under a lot of stress or a lot of pain is I shut down. I do recognize the importance being able to talk and to have a compassionate witness. Like, you don't need to solve the problem. You just need to be there to listen. Sometimes that's all people need, is somebody to just like truly listen.
Yeah, show some understanding.
Yep, a little compassion, a little validation. And maybe we're wired as human beings, maybe some more than others, that we got to fix it, right? But we don't always have to fix it. We can just be there for people.
I think that's also a thing in the Western world, that automatically when we think of pain, it's always that we look for a fix and it has to be fixed. Whereas it's just, pain is a part of life, and we're all going to experience pain, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental in our life. We're all going to have back pain in our life.
Right.
It doesn't mean it has to be debilitating, and doesn't mean that we necessarily have to have it fixed, for lack of a better term. So, yeah, I think that's a Western world thing for sure.
Probably, yeah. Yep, I would agree.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if anybody else who's listening in has any questions. So I'll monitor it to see if anything comes in. But again, we can't thank you enough for joining us tonight, Keith. It was great. And judging by the comments and questions that came in, I think the people who are listening in liked it. And I know that's there's a couple of watch parties going on in different groups and things like that on Facebook right now.
Cool.
Where some more people are tuning in. So
I want to say that Keith, that I know we talked to you before in San Diego about you coming to speak in some of our courses, and it looks like the next couple ones we're doing, at least the next one or two, will probably be via Zoom. So you don't have to drive across the province. So we're going to sit here live just to say that hopefully you can still come join us on those, and from the comfort of your own home, and we'll give you another platform to kind of share your story to a group of participants. So.
I appreciate that, Eric, and I was really looking forward to the opportunity to join you guys in person, and we will get through this little pandemic as we have in the past, and we'll come through it the other side. And I look forward to an opportunity to sort of work with you guys person to person. But I'm more than happy to join you guys, because, like I said, I really do appreciate what you guys are doing. I think I said before we got started here, I have to remind myself every now and then, I have to look back to see how far we have come, because I get a little frustrated at times about, we're not making enough change and we're not where we're at. But, I think over the last 30 years, we're getting there. And it's really the work that people like you guys are doing that are making this change. And so as somebody who has gone through some pretty challenging times, it's really means a lot to me to see your passion. Because you know what? I know you guys you're not doing it because you're getting rich. You're not doing it because people are making bronze statues and putting up on the city courtyard. And you'd
be cool if they did, though.
I know. Maybe they will someday. But, you're doing it because you believe in it and you know how important it is. And it means so much to me to see your passion and your empathy and your care. So I'm happy to walk this journey with you guys wherever I can.
Well, I can tell you for sure, Keith, and every time we teach the course, we put up people who have helped us along the way, and I don't think we'd be doing what we're doing without the opportunity to hear your story and to get the support from folks like yourself along the way. So it's very much mutual, my friend.
Yeah,
appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks. It's great to have you here tonight.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
Only other comments that are coming in is a couple of thank yous, which I think is going to be reverberated through everybody who watched. So thanks again, Keith. And thank you for giving us an hour of your time tonight. Can't thank you enough.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks very much. Thanks for all you do.
Take care.
See ya.